The rain-slicked streets of Seattle gleamed under the streetlights, and I was soaked to the bone, my sneakers squeaking with every step. My delivery app pinged relentlessly, order 472, 5th floor. Cascade Towers. Deliver by 7:45 p.m. And I cursed under my breath, juggling grocery bags while dodging puddles. I'm just a guy who delivers groceries. So why did my heart race every time I climbed the stairs to apartment 5B? My name's Ethan Carter, 27. A former art student turned gig worker after life decided dreams don't pay rent. Cascade Towers was my regular haunt. A sleek high-rise filled with people who tipped well but barely looked at me. Except for him. Julian Hayes, the lawyer in 5B, with his sharp suits and sharper smile, who always said, "Thanks, Ethan," like my name mattered. Tonight, though, something was different. The elevator dinged, and as I stepped onto the 5th floor, the air felt heavier, like the universe was holding its breath. I knocked on 5B, the grocery bags cutting into my palms. Julian opened the door, and there he was, tie loosened, dark hair slightly mussed, his hazel eyes catching the hallway light. "Ethan, you're a lifesaver," he said, his voice warm, like he meant it. I handed over the bag's organic kale, artisanal cheese, a bottle of red wine, and expected the usual nod and tip. But he didn't step back. Instead, he leaned against the doorframe, studying me like I was more than just the delivery guy. "You're soaked," he said, his gaze flicking to my dripping jacket. "Come in. Dry off. I've got coffee. Or wine, if you're feeling fancy." I laughed, assuming it was a joke, but his expression didn't waver. My pulse stuttered. "I'm good, man. Gotta keep moving," I said, but my feet didn't budge. Julian raised an eyebrow, a playful challenge in his eyes. "Ethan, it's pouring out there. Stay for dinner. I'm cooking." I should have said no. I had 3 more deliveries, a roommate waiting for me to split the electric bill, and a life that didn't involve lingering in fancy apartments. But something in his voice, soft, insistent, almost vulnerable, pulled me in. I stepped inside, the door clicking shut behind me, and suddenly, my world felt too small for what was happening. Julian's apartment was everything I wasn't: polished, intentional, alive with the scent of garlic and rosemary. A jazz record spun lazily on a turntable, and floor-to-ceiling windows framed the glittering city below. "Sit," he said, gesturing to a bar stool at the kitchen island. I perched awkwardly, my wet jacket dripping onto his pristine floor. "Sorry about the mess," I mumbled, but he waved it off, pouring me a glass of wine. "Messes are human," he said. "I deal with enough sterile perfection at the firm." We really talked. Not the usual small talk about weather or traffic. He asked about my life, my art, why I'd stopped painting. I told him things I hadn't told anyone. How my dad kicked me out at 17 when I came out. How I'd been scraping by ever since. How the world felt like it was built to keep people like me invisible. Julian listened, his eyes steady, like he was memorizing every word. In return, he shared pieces of himself: a childhood in foster care, a scholarship to law school, the pressure of being the perfect gay man in a cutthroat firm. "We're not so different," he said, and I wanted to believe him, even if his world seemed galaxies away from mine. Dinner was simple pasta with a sauce he'd made from scratch, but it felt like a ritual. Every glance, every accidental brush of our hands as we passed plates, sparked something I couldn't name. I caught myself staring at the way his fingers curled around his wine glass, the way his laugh lines deepened when he teased me about my terrible taste in delivery apps. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was just passing through someone's life. But then his phone buzzed, shattering the moment. He glanced at it, his face tightening. Work, he muttered, standing to take the call in the next room. I heard fragments, yes. I'll be there. No. It's under control. And when he returned, the warmth in his eyes was clouded. Everything okay? I asked. But he just smiled. A little too tightly. Just the usual chaos. Big case coming up. He didn't elaborate. And I didn't push. But the air had shifted. I finished my wine, suddenly aware of my damp clothes and the ticking clock on my phone. I should go, I said, standing. Julian's hand grazed my arm, stopping me. Come back tomorrow, he said. Not a question. Same time. I nodded, my throat tight, and left before I could overthink it. The rain had stopped, but my head was a storm. Why me? Why now? Julian Hayes was a man who could have anyone. So why was he looking at me like I was someone worth keeping? The next evening, I was back at Cascade Towers. My stomach knotted with something between dread and anticipation. I told myself it was just another delivery. But the single bottle of olive oil in my bag felt like a flimsy excuse. Julian's text from earlier, don't forget. 7 p.m. sharp, had been burning a hole in my phone all day. When he opened the door, he was in a white button-down, sleeves rolled up, a dish towel slung over his shoulder. You're punctual, he said, grinning. I like that. I stepped inside, and the apartment felt different tonight, more lived in. Like he'd let his guard down. A sketchbook lay open on the coffee table, filled with pencil drawings of cityscapes. Yours? I asked, surprised. He nodded, almost shy. Old habit. Helps me think. We cooked together. Or rather, I chopped vegetables while he worked some kind of magic with spices. The kitchen was warm, the air thick with the scent of sizzling onions and laughter. He told me about his latest case, a pro bono fight for a local LGBTQ shelter facing eviction. It's personal, he said quietly, stirring the sauce. I was in a place like that once. They saved me. I wanted to ask more, but the way his jaw tightened told me to wait. Instead, I shared stories of my own late nights sketching in coffee shops. The time I hitchhiked across Oregon just to see the ocean. He listened like every word was a gift. And I felt seen in a way I hadn't since I was a kid with a paintbrush and too many dreams. As we ate, the conversation turned deeper. Do you ever feel like you're running out of time? He asked, his voice low. Like you're chasing something you can't name. I nodded, my chest tight. Every day? Our eyes met. And for a moment, the world was just us two people who'd been bruised by life, but were still reaching for something more. Then his phone rang again. This time, he ignored it. But the tension was back, etching lines around his mouth. You don't have to answer that, I said, half joking. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. It's not just work, Ethan. It's complicated. I didn't push, but the unspoken weight hung between us. When I left that night, his goodbye lingered a soft. See you soon. That felt like a promise. The next few weeks were a blur of deliveries and dinners. I'd show up with groceries, and we'd end up talking until midnight, sharing stories, stealing glances. I learned Julian's quirks, the way he hummed jazz tunes when he cooked, how he always left one light on when he slept. He learned mine, my habit of doodling on napkins, my fear of being stuck in this gig forever. Every night, I left a little more in love, a little more terrified. He was a lawyer with a corner office. I was a guy with a bike and $12 in my bank account. How could this work? But the calls kept coming. Late-night texts from partners at the firm. Cryptic messages he brushed off. One night, I caught a name on his screen, Marcus, and his face went pale. Old friend, he said, but his voice was hollow. I didn't ask, but doubt crept in. Was I just a distraction? A way to pass the time? Then came the night that changed everything. I arrived at 5B, grocery bag in hand. But Julian wasn't smiling. His apartment was a mess, papers strewn across the table. A glass of whiskey half empty. Bad day? I asked, trying to keep it light. He didn't answer. Just pulled me into a kiss. Sudden and desperate. My heart slammed against my ribs as I kissed him back. The grocery bag hitting the floor. But when we pulled apart, his eyes were haunted. "Ethan, there's something I need to tell you," he said, and my stomach dropped. Julian's words hung in the air, heavy as the Seattle fog outside. "I'm not who you think I am," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I stood frozen, the taste of his kiss still on my lips. My mind racing. Was this where the fairy tale ended? Where the hot lawyer realized the delivery guy wasn't worth the trouble? "Talk to me," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. He sank onto the couch, gesturing for me to sit. I did, keeping space between us, afraid of what came next. Julian stared at his hands, like they held the answers he didn't want to give. "I'm in the middle of something dangerous," he said finally. "The case I'm working on, it's not just about a shelter. It's about exposing a network of people profiting off vulnerable kids. People with power. People who don't like being crossed." I swallowed hard. "And Marcus?" The name slipped out before I could stop it. Julian's eyes flicked up, surprised, then softened. "He's not an ex, if that's what you're thinking. He's a private investigator helping me. But he's been getting threats. And now, so have I." He pulled out his phone, showing me a text, "Back off, or you'll regret it." My blood ran cold. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, hurt mingling with fear. Julian reached for my hand, his grip tight. "Because I didn't want you in this. I didn't want you to look at me like I'm some reckless idiot who's about to ruin everything." His voice cracked, and I saw the man beneath the polished exterior scared, determined, human. "But you're not just some guy, Ethan. You're the best part of my day." My heart twisted. I wanted to pull him close, to promise I'd stay no matter what. But the weight of his words pressed down on me. "What happens if you don't back off?" I asked. He didn't answer, just looked at me with eyes that said too much and not enough. The next few days were a tightrope. I kept delivering groceries, but every knock on 5B felt like a gamble. Julian was distracted, his smiles fleeting. He'd show me bits of his world case files, maps of the city marked with names I didn't recognize, but he kept the worst of it hidden. I tried to be there, to be the guy who made him laugh, who reminded him there was more to life than threats and secrets. But fear was a third wheel, always lurking. One night, I arrived to find his door ajar. My heart stopped. I pushed it open, calling his name. But the apartment was dark, papers scattered like leaves after a storm. "Julian," I whispered, stepping inside. A shadow moved, and I froze. But it was him, slumped in a chair, a bruise blooming on his cheek. "Jesus, what happened?" I rushed to him, my hands hovering, afraid to touch. "They sent someone," he said, his voice hoarse. A warning. Rage flared in me, hotter than I'd ever felt. "Who did this? Tell me." But Julian shook his head. "You can't get involved, Ethan. This is bigger than us." I wanted to argue, to demand answers, but the look in his eyes stopped me. Instead, I grabbed a washcloth, ran it under cold water, and pressed it to his bruise. He winced, but didn't pull away. "You shouldn't be here," he murmured, but his hand found mine, holding tight. "I'm not going anywhere," I said, and I meant it. That night, we didn't kiss, didn't talk about love. We just sat there, two people caught in a storm, holding on to each other like it was all we had. The weeks that followed were a blur of fear and defiance. Julian threw himself into the case, working late nights with Marcus, while I kept showing up with groceries and a stubborn refusal to let him face this alone. We didn't talk about the future, too fragile, too uncertain, but every shared meal, every quiet moment, felt like a vow. I started sketching again, inspired by him, filling napkins with his profile, his hands, the way he looked when he thought no one was watching. One night, he showed me the evidence they'd gathered, documents proving a city official was funneling money meant for the shelter into private accounts. "If this gets out, it could change everything," he said, his eyes bright with hope and exhaustion. "But it's risky. They know we're close." I wanted to beg him to stop, to choose safety over justice. But I knew he wouldn't. This was who he was, a man who fought for people like the kid he used to be. The breaking point came on a cold November evening. I was halfway to Cascade Towers when my phone buzzed with a voicemail from Julian. "Ethan, don't come tonight. It's not safe." I'm sorry." His voice was strained, and I knew something was wrong. I ignored the warning, pedaling faster, my breath clouding in the frigid air. When I reached 5B, the door was locked, the apartment silent. Panic clawed at me. I called Marcus, who answered on the first ring. "He's at the firm," he said, his voice grim. "Get here. Now." I biked across town, my legs burning, and burst into the law firm's lobby, where Marcus met me. "They got to one of our witnesses," he said, leading me to a conference room. Julian was there, pacing, his face a mask of fury and guilt. "They're trying to bury this," he said. "They threatened her family. She's gone." I didn't know what to say, so I just grabbed his hand, grounding him. "We're not done," I said. "You're not done." That night, we made a plan. Julian and Marcus would leak the evidence to a journalist they trusted, someone outside the city's corrupt web. I wasn't supposed to be part of it, but I insisted. "I'm in this with you," I told Julian. And for the first time, he didn't argue. We worked through the night, sorting files, double-checking every detail. At dawn, the story broke online, and by noon, it was everywhere: TV, social media, the works. The official was arrested, the shelter saved, and Julian's name was in the headlines as the lawyer who'd risked everything. But victory came at a cost. Julian's firm let him go, citing reckless conduct. He didn't care. "It was worth it," he told me, his smile tired but real. We stood on his balcony, the city sprawling below, and he kissed me, slow and certain, like we'd earned this moment. "You stayed," he said, his voice thick. "Through all of it." I laughed, brushing a thumb across his cheek. "You asked me to stay for dinner. How could I say no?" We moved in together a month later, pooling our meager savings for a tiny apartment that felt like a palace because it was ours. I started painting again, selling pieces at local markets, while Julian took on freelance legal work, helping people the system often ignored. We weren't rich, and the world was still messy, but we had each author a love born from grocery bags and late-night confessions, strong enough to weather any storm. The last time I delivered groceries to Cascade Towers, it was for us. As I set the bags on our kitchen counter, Julian wrapped his arms around me, his breath warm against my neck. "You're more than a delivery guy, Ethan," he whispered. And for the first time, I believed it.